Now I will reveal my secret.
What? How did he hide that?
In Universe 7, it was a sunny day on Earth, and Bulma had organized another one of her famous banquets, bringing together all her close friends, and of course Beerus, the god of destruction of the 7th universe, and Whis, his ever-present companion. The table was laden with all kinds of food, from typical Earth dishes to intergalactic delicacies that Bulma had managed to get to impress Beerus and Whis, in addition to wanting to try foods from other worlds. Everyone was chatting animatedly, and Goku and Vegeta as always ate with great pleasure, but with an expression of great hunger and wanting a little more from the dishes. While everyone was having fun, Bulma, always curious, observed Beerus. Something about him had caught her attention for some time, but she had never had the courage to ask. After all, Beerus, being a god of destruction, was known for his impatience and explosive temper, which led to the destruction of countless planets over the years. But Bulma wasn't one to back down from curiosity, especially now that she had a certain friendship with Beerus. Bulma said, "Beerus, can I ask you a question? Something that has always intrigued me." Beerus stopped chewing for a moment and looked at her suspiciously. Beerus replied, and what would it be? I hope it's not something silly." Bulma smiled, a little nervous, but continued. Bulma said, "You are a warrior who has existed for centuries, perhaps even millennia, right? You must have been through countless battles. But what intrigues me is that you don't have any scars. Your body is completely smooth, as if you have never really fought. How is that possible?" Everyone at the table was silent for a moment. Goku, who was devouring a plate full of meat, stopped and looked curiously at Beerus. Vegeta, crossing his arms, gave the god of destruction an analytical look. Beerus narrowed his eyes at Bulma. He clearly didn't like the question, but before he could answer, Whis intervened with his usual serenity. Whis said, "Oh, Bulma, that is an interesting question, and the answer is quite simple actually." Everyone's eyes turned to Whis. The angel calmly took a sip of his tea before continuing. Whis replied, "Beerus, being the god of destruction, has certainly been through countless battles throughout his existence. However, as part of my role as his angel and guide, I keep a special ability active around Beerus's body. This ability makes Beerus's appearance always remain perfect in the eyes of others, without marks or scars, no matter how injured he may have been in previous battles." Goku's eyes widened in surprise. Goku said, "Really? So that means Beerus has been hurt several times, but we never get to see it?" Vegeta frowned, even more interested now. Vegeta replied, I figured he'd been through some good fights, but I didn't think he'd hide his scars." Beerus, visibly uncomfortable, placed the glass of juice back on the table with a little more force than necessary, causing a slight awkward silence. Beerus said, "That's none of your business. My battles are ancient history, and as for my scars, well, they're not something I need to show to every insignificant being that crosses my path." Bulma, however, was not intimidated by Beerus's attitude. Knowing that he wouldn't destroy her for something so small, she pressed a little harder. Bulma said, "Oh, come on, Beerus. That just made us even more curious. Are you embarrassed to show your scars?" Beerus's eyes narrowed even more. Goku laughed, trying to ease the tension. Goku said, "Oh, Bulma, you're brave to ask that. But then again, I'd like to see them too. It must be amazing to see the scars of someone as strong as Beerus." Whis, who had been watching the conversation with a calm smile, intervened once more. Whis said, "If Beerus-sama permits, I could deactivate this ability, and then you could see for yourselves the marks left by your battles. However, I must warn you that this may reveal more than you are prepared to see." Beerus looked at Whis with a disapproving look, but after a moment of thought, he sighed deeply. Beerus replied, "Tsuki, I really hate it when you put me in this position, Whis. Very well, if everyone here is so interested in my old wounds, I will allow you to see them, but just know that it does not change the fact that I am far superior to any of you." Whis said, "As you wish, Beerus-sama." With a subtle movement of his staff, Whis made a slight gesture in the air, and a soft blue aura began to surround Beerus. Suddenly Beerus's body glowed, and then marks and scars began to appear. What had once been smooth, flawless skin now revealed deep cuts, burn marks, and signs of old injuries. Long scars slashed across Beerus's torso, and smaller marks covered his arms and legs. Some appeared more recent, while others looked very old, almost faded by time. Each one seemed to tell a story of intense battles, some of which seemed to have been fought fought against equally powerful opponents. Everyone at the table fell silent. Even Goku, always cheerful, was impressed by what he saw. Vegeta, who normally maintained a defiant posture, watched with respect, recognizing the marks of fierce battles. Goku spoke, "Wow, Beerus, I never would have imagined you had so many scars. You must have faced incredibly strong opponents." Vegeta replied, "These marks, they're from battles against other gods of destruction, aren't they?" Beerus, looking at them with a somber expression, Beerus said, "Some, yes. Others, from beings who dared to challenge me. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's part of who I am." Bulma, who was watching everything attentively, felt a mixture of surprise and empathy. Bulma said, "I didn't expect that, but it makes sense. A being who lives so long and goes through so many battles must carry scars, not only physical, but also emotional." Whis calmly replied, "Exactly, Bulma. Although Beerus-sama is a god of destruction, he is also a creature who has lived for a long time and faced many hardships. These scars are a reflection of that." Beerus rolled his eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the tone of the conversation. Beerus said, "Enough of this. I didn't come here to be analyzed like some kind of museum relic. I came to eat and enjoy the banquet. Now that you've seen enough, Whis, activate the ability again." Whis nodded, and with another wave of his staff, Beerus's scars began to disappear, as if they had never been there. The aura of perfection once again enveloped the god of destruction's body. Goku, however, couldn't hide an excited smile. Goku said, "I still want to fight you for real someday, Beerus. Seeing those scars just made me even more excited." Beerus replied, "You'll never learn, will you, Goku? But I'll tell you one thing. If I ever fight you without holding back my power, you can be sure that you'll get some scars too." Everyone laughed, and the atmosphere at the table became light again. The banquet continued, and although the revelation of Beerus's scars had surprised everyone, their respect for him only grew. Even though he was a god of destruction, he, like everyone else, bore the marks of the battles he had fought throughout his existence. As the banquet continued, Beerus still seemed slightly irritated by the curiosity of others. He wasn't the type to like talking about the past or his battles, much less about his scars. It was something he preferred to keep hidden, not only for the sake of pride, but because these marks made him feel less powerful. Beerus said, "Don't think I'm comfortable showing you this. In fact, I hate talking about my scars. They remind me that even though I'm a god of destruction, these marks are signs that at some point I was hurt, and that irritates me." He gave everyone at the table a serious look, making the atmosphere a little more tense. Beerus replied, "If it weren't for the fact that I already have a certain intimacy with some of you, I would never have allowed you to see these scars. Otherwise, I wouldn't have hesitated to eliminate everyone here to make sure no one knew about this." Goku, even with Beerus's serious look, couldn't help but ask a question. Goku said, "Do you really think these scars make you look weaker, Beerus?" Beerus replied, "Among the gods of destruction, any sign of weakness can be fatal. If any of them knew that I bore these scars, they might see me as vulnerable, and I cannot allow that. That is why this ability of Whis is so important. It keeps my image of perfection intact, something that is crucial to my role." Whis, who had been listening silently, smiled slightly and spoke in a calm tone. Whis said, "I can reveal to all of you who was responsible for causing some of these scars on Mr. Beerus, since I see that everyone is curious." Goku quickly said excitedly, "I want to know who was the person who managed to injure Beerus." After the banquet, night fell over the earth, and the cool breeze of the city enveloped everyone outside of Capsule Corporation. Beerus, Goku, Vegeta, Bulma, and Whis had gone out into the courtyard, admiring the stars that twinkled in the sky. Goku was particularly excited, even after all the food he had devoured. The revelation of Beerus's scars during dinner seemed to have piqued his natural curiosity. Goku said, "Hey Beerus, now that we've seen your scars, I've been wondering, how did you get some of them?" Beerus, who had been calmly looking at the sky, turned to Goku with an irritated expression. Beerus replied, "Tsk, you again with that? It's none of your business how I got those scars, Goku. Those are stories I'd rather forget." But Goku's curiosity was relentless. He was fascinated by the idea that Beerus, such a powerful being, had faced intense enough battles to earn scars, which to him only increased his respect for the god of destruction. Goku said, "Oh, come on, Beerus, just a story. I bet everyone here wants to know." Vegeta, who had his arms crossed, gave a slight smile but said nothing. He was also curious, although he wasn't the type to admit it so easily. Bulma, next to Whis, took the opportunity to press Beerus a little more. Bulma said, "Come on, Beerus, after all the feast I prepared for you, I think you can tell us a story, right? It doesn't have to be about all the scars, just about who caused the biggest ones." Beerus snorted, clearly irritated by the direction the conversation was going. He didn't want to talk about his scars, especially since they reminded him that at some point he had been hurt. something he preferred to hide anyway. Beerus replied, "You guys don't give up, do you? I told you this isn't something for you to worry about. These scars are from my past, and frankly, they're none of your business." Whis, watching the situation with his usual calm smile, saw an opportunity to clarify a few things. He knew Beerus well and knew how much the god of destruction hated talking about his defeats or moments of weakness. But at the same time, Whis felt it might be instructive to tell everyone about an important battle in Beerus's past. Whis said, "Well, if Beerus-sama refuses to talk about his scars, perhaps I can share one of the more interesting stories about how he acquired some of them." Beerus quickly turned to Whis with a look that was a mix of shock and anger. Beerus replied, "Whis, don't even think about it. I didn't authorize you to tell anything." Whis, however, continued as if Beerus hadn't said anything, still maintaining his calm and gentle tone. Whis said, "Some of Beerus-sama's deepest and most significant scars were acquired during a battle with Kitela, the god of destruction of the fourth universe." Upon hearing Kitela's name, Beerus's face immediately fell. Goku and Vegeta, who had already heard of the grudge between the two gods, were intrigued. Goku said, "Kitela? That rat? I knew you two didn't get along, but I didn't know you had actually fought." Vegeta replied, That makes sense. Beerus and Kitela are like fire and water. It was only a matter of time before they ended up in a fight." Bulma, who was not so familiar with the rivalry between Beerus and Kitela, looked at Whis curiously. Bulma said, "And what happened in that fight? How did Beerus end up so injured?" Whis, always cautious with his words, paused before continuing. Whis replied, "The battle between the two was intense. Kitela, being one of the most cunning gods, managed to hurt Beerus in ways that few others have managed. They faced each other in a contest of power and strategy, and although Beerus emerged victorious in the end, he suffered some considerable injuries. The scars he bears on his abdomen and right arm are a result of that fight." Beerus remained silent, but it was clear that the mention of Kitela bothered him. He crossed his arms and turned his face away, clearly embarrassed at having his weaknesses revealed. Beerus said, "I would prefer that no one know about this, Whis. Kitela is a despicable rat, and I don't want him to brag about something so insignificant. These scars are just reminders of a battle I'd like to forget." Goku, however, was even more intrigued. Goku said, "So you really got hurt badly against Kitela? That must have been an incredible fight. I would have loved to have seen that." Vegeta, with a wry smile, teased Beerus. Vegeta said, "So Kitela managed to hurt you. Don't tell me the almighty Beerus had a hard time against a god like him." Beerus, visibly irritated, rolled his eyes at Vegeta, and for a moment the tension in the air increased. He hated to admit, even indirectly, that Kitela had been a real threat. Beerus's pride was something monumental, and any reminder that he had been hurt, especially by an opponent he despised, was a humiliation that he avoided at all costs. Beerus replied, "Don't get too excited, Vegeta. Kitela may have injured me, but in the end I defeated him. These scars are a reminder that even the most despicable gods can be dangerous. But make no mistake, just because he injured me doesn't mean he's stronger. The victory was mine." Whis, sensing the tension, intervened again. Whis said, "Exactly. Beerus-sama emerged victorious. However, it was a difficult battle and Kitela should certainly not be underestimated. He is extremely intelligent and uses strategies that can surprise even the most experienced of gods." Bulma, with her characteristic sensitivity, noticed Beerus's discomfort and tried to change the tone of the conversation. Bulma said, "Well, I think we all have scars, physical or emotional, that we'd rather forget, but they are part of who we are. In your case, Beerus, I think they only show how powerful and resilient you are. After all, you survived fights that few others could." Goku agreed with Bulma and replied, "That's true, and knowing that even you, Beerus, have faced such strong opponents only makes me more motivated. I want to reach the level where I can fight on equal terms with gods like you." Beerus said, Good luck with that, Goku. You'll need more than motivation to reach my level." Despite Beerus's initial irritation, the conversation eventually became lighter. Deep down he knew that, although he hated admitting his vulnerabilities, he had created a kind of bond with those people, something he wouldn't have with other beings. If it had been under any other circumstances, if other gods of destruction had known about his scars, Beerus would have eliminated them without hesitation to keep his reputation intact. Beerus said, "Don't think I'm always so lenient. If I didn't have a certain amount of consideration for some of you, you would all have been eliminated by now for daring to bring up this subject. But don't think that makes me weaker." Whis smiled, knowing that despite Beerus' stern attitude, he had a connection with Goku, Vegeta, and Bulma that went beyond his simple role as a destroyer. Even with his scars and past wounds, Beerus was still a powerful being, feared and respected throughout the multiverse. Whis said, "That's true, Beerus-sama, but I think that, deep down, this connection you created here on Earth may be one of the reasons why you feel comfortable sharing a bit of your past." Beerus snorted again, but this time without so much anger. Beerus replied, "Tisk, don't get used to it. You caught me on a good day, that's all." The night remained calm, with the group still gathered in the courtyard of Capsule Corporation. Beerus' initial discomfort seemed to be dissipating, although he maintained his air of superiority, as always. Goku, still impressed by Whis' revelation, approached Beerus a little closer with a sincere smile on his face. Goku said, "I really admire you, Beerus. Even with all those scars, you're still the strongest guy I've ever met. I hope that one day I can fight you again, and who knows, even surpass you." Beerus, without taking his eyes off the sky, sighed with a mixture of tiredness and acceptance. Beerus replied, "You'll never change, will you? But I'll tell you one thing, Goku. If you ever really manage to surpass me, maybe I'll tell you about other battles, but don't get too excited." Vegeta, who had been silent until then, took a step forward, crossing his arms. Vegeta said, "If Kakarot gets there first, I'll be right behind him. Don't think he'll beat you by himself." Bulma smiled, observing the bond that had somehow formed between the warriors and the god of destruction. Bulma said, "If you keep worrying so much about fighting, you'll end up eating another feast soon." Beerus said, "I know I shouldn't say this since it's obvious, but don't reveal anything about my scars or my battle against Kitela, or I'll remind you why I'm the god of destruction and the most powerful being in this universe." Beerus said with an arrogant but serious smile on his face, showing that he wasn't joking with his words, but rather giving everyone a warning. With all that, Whis approached Beerus, and soon the two left, leaving Goku, Vegeta, and Bulma slightly afraid of Beerus' words and his subtle warning. Guys, this is how we end our story. Did you know about these secrets about Beerus and his scars? Did you like the story? If you want to see more epic stories like this, leave your like and also subscribe to the channel. Bye.